and pursuivants of arms from every part of Europe. In the long list by the Garonne on the landward side of the northern gate, there had been many a strange combat, when the Teutonic knight, fresh from the conquest of the Prussian heathen, ran a course against the Knight of Calatrava, hardened by continual struggle against the Mois, or cavaliers from Portugal broke a lance with Scandinavian warriors from a further shore of the great northern ocean. Here flooded many an outland pennon, bearing symbol and blazonry from the banks of the Danube, the wilds of Lithuania and the mountain strongholds of Hungary, for chivalry was of no clime and of no race, nor was any land so wild that the fame and name of the prince had not sounded through it from border to border. Great, however, was the excitement through town and district when it was learned that on the third Wednesday in Advent there would be held a passage-at-arms in which 5 knights of England would hold the list against all comers. The great concourse of noblemen and famous soldiers, the national character of the contest, and the fact that this was a last trial of arms before what promised to be an arduous and bloody war, all united to make the event one of the most notable and brilliant that Bordeaux had ever seen. On the eve of the contest, the peasants flocked in from the whole district of the Medoc, and the fields beyond the walls were whitened with the tents of those who could find no warmer lodging. From the distant camp of Dax, too, and from Blaye, Beige, Libourne, Saint-Emilion, Castellon, Saint-Maquet, Cardelec, Rheims, and all the cluster of flourishing towns which look upon Bordeaux as their mother, there thronged an unceasing stream of horsemen and of footmen, all converging upon the great city. By the morning of the day on which the courses were to be run, not less than 80 people had assembled round the list and along the low grassy ridge which looks down upon the scene of the encounter. It was, as may well be imagined, no easy matter among so many noted cavaliers to choose out 5 on either side, who should have precedence over their fellows. A score of secondary combats had nearly arisen from the rivalries and bad blood created by the selection, and it was only the influence of the prince and the efforts of the older barons which kept the peace among so many eager and fiery soldiers. Not till the day before the courses were the shields finally hung out for the inspection of the ladies and the heralds, so that all men might know the names of the champions and have the opportunity to prefer any charge against them, should there be stain upon them which should disqualify them from taking part in so noble and honourable ceremony. Then, of the younger men, Sir Thomas Percy of Northumberland, Sir Thomas Wake of Yorkshire, and Sir William Beauchamp of Gloucestershire were finally selected to uphold the honour of England. On the other side were the veteran Captal de Batch and the brawny Olivier de Clisson, with the free companion Sir Perducas d'Albret, the valiant Lord of Musident, and Sigismund von Altenstadt of the Teutonic Order. The older soldiers among the English shook their heads as they looked upon the escutcheons of these famous warriors, for they were all men who had spent their lives upon the saddle, and bravery and strength can avail little against experience and wisdom of war. There is no better seat and no true lance, sire, said Chandos, but, if I may say so without fear of offence, it were not fitting that you should join in this debate. And why, Sir John? Because, sire, it is not for you to take part with Gascons against English, or with English against Gascons, seeing that you are lord of both. We are not too well loved by the Gascons now, and it is but the golden link of your princely coronet which holds us together. If that be snapped, I know not what would follow. Snapped? Sir John, cried the prince, with an angry sparkle in his dark eyes. What manner of talk is this? You speak as though the allegiance of our people were a thing which might be thrown off on like a falcon's jessel. With a sorry hack one uses whip and spur, sire, said Chandos, but with a horse of blood and spirit a good cavalier is gentle and soothing, coaxing rather than forcing. These folk are strange people, and you must hold their love, even as you have it now, for you will get from their kindness what all the pennons in your army could not wring from them. You are overgrave today, John, the prince answered. We may keep such questions for our council chamber. But how now, my brothers of Spain and of Majorca, what think you of this challenge? I look to see some handsome joisting, said Don Pedro, who rode with the king of Majorca upon the right of the prince, while Chandos was on the left. By St. James of Compostela, but these burghers would bear some taxing. See to the broadcloth and velvet that the rogues bear upon their backs. By my troth, if they were my subjects, they would be glad enough to wear folding and leather ere I had done with them. But mayhap it is best to let the wool grow long ere you clip it. "It is our pride," the prince answered coldly, "that we rule over freemen and not slaves." "Every man to his own humor," said Pedro carelessly. "Carriajo, there is a sweet face at yonder window. Don Fernando, I pray you to mark the house, and to have the maid brought to us at the abbey." "Nay, brother, nay," cried the prince impatiently. "I have had occasion to tell you more than once that things are not ordered in this way in Aquitaine." "A thousand pardons, dear friend," the Spaniard answered quickly, for a flush of anger had sprung to the dark cheek of the English prince. "You make my exile so like a home that I forget at times that I am not in very truth back in Castile. Every land hath indeed its ways and manners, but I promise you, Edward, that when you are my guest in Toledo or Madrid, you shall not yearn in vain for any commoner's daughter on whom you may deign to cast your eye." "Your talk, sire," said the prince still more coldly, "is not such as I love to hear from your lips. I have no taste for such amours as you speak of, and I have sworn that my name shall be coupled with that of no woman save my ever dear wife." "Ever the mirror of true chivalry," exclaimed Pedro, while James of Majorca, frightened at the stern countenance of their all-powerful protector, plucked hard at the mantle of his brother exile. "Have a care, cousin," he whispered. "For the sake of the Virgin, have a care, for you have angered him." "Sure, fear not," the other answered in the same low tone. "If I miss one stoop, I will strike him on the next. Mark me else. Fair cousin," he continued, turning to the prince, "these be rare men-at-arms and lusty bowmen. It would be hard indeed to match them. They have journeyed far, sire, but they have never yet found their match. Nor ever will, I doubt not. I feel myself to be back upon my throne when I look at them. But tell me, dear coz, what shall we do next, when we have driven this bastard Henry from the kingdom which he hath filched?" "We shall then compel the King of Aragon to place our good friend and brother James of Majorca upon the throne." "Noble and generous prince," cried the little monarch. "That done," said King Pedro, glancing out of the corners of his eyes at the young conqueror, "we shall unite the forces of England, of Aquitaine, of Spain, and of Majorca. It would be shame to us if we did not do some great deed with such forces ready to our hand." "You say truly, brother," cried the prince, his eyes kindling at the thought. "Methinks that we could not do anything more pleasing to Our Lady than to drive the heathen Moors out of the country." "I am with you, Edward, as true as hilt to blade. But, by St. James, we shall not let these Moors make mock at us from over the sea. We must take ship and thrust them from Africa." "By heaven, yes," cried the prince, "and it is a dream of my heart that our English pennon shall wave upon the Mount of Olives, and the lions and lilies float over the holy city. And why not, dear coz, your bowmen have cleared a path to Paris, and why not to Jerusalem? Once there, your arms might rest." "Nay, there is more to be done," cried the prince, carried away by the ambitious dream. "There is still the city of Constantine to be taken, and war to be waged against the Soldan of Damascus. And beyond him again there is tribute to be levied from the Cham of Tati and from the kingdom of Cathay. Ha! John, what say you? Can we not go as far eastward as Richard of the Lion Heart?" "By my soul, John," said the prince, "I have never known you turn laggard before. The babbling hound, sire, is not always the first at the mort," the old knight answered. It was indeed an enormous crowd which covered the whole vast plain from the line of vineyards to the river bank. From a northern gate the prince and his companions looked down at a dark sea of heads, brightened here and there by the coloured hoods of the women or by the sparkling headpieces of archers and men-at-arms. In the centre of this vast assemblage the list seemed but a narrow strip of green marked out with banners and streamers, while a gleam of white with a flutter of pennons at either end showed where the marquees were pitched which served as the dressing rooms of the combatants. A path had been staked off from the city gate to the stands which had been erected for the court and the nobility. Down this, amid the shouts of the enormous multitude, the prince cantered with his 2 attendant kings, his high officers of state, and his long train of lords and ladies, courtiers, councillors, and soldiers, with toss of plume and flash of jewel, sheen of silk and glint of gold, as rich and gallant a show as heart could wish. The head of the cavalcade had reached the lists ere the rear had come clear of the city gate. For the fairest and the bravest had assembled from all the broad lands which are watered by the Dordogne and the Garonne. Here rode dark-browed cavaliers from the sunny south, fiery soldiers from Gascony, graceful courtiers of Limousin or Saintonge, and gallant young Englishmen from beyond the seas. Here, too, were the beautiful brunettes of the Gironde, with eyes which outflashed their jewels, while beside them rode their blonde sisters of England, clear-cut and aquiline, swathed in swan's down and ermine, for the air was biting though the sun was bright. Slowly the long and glittering train wound into the lists, until every horse had been tethered by the varlets in waiting, and every lord and lady seated in the long stands which stretched, rich in tapestry and velvet and blazoned arms, on either side of the centre of the arena. The holders of the lists occupied the end which was nearest to the city gate. They, in front of their respective pavilions, flew the martlets of Audley, the roses of Loing, the scarlet bars of Wake, the lion of the Percys, and the silver wings of the Beauchamps, each supported by a squire clad in hanging green stuff to represent so many Tritons, and bearing a huge conch shell in their left hands. Behind the tents the great war horses, armed at all points, champed and reared, while their masters sat at the doors of their pavilions, with their helmets upon their knees, chatting as to the order of the day's doings. The English archers and men-at-arms had mustered at that end of the list, but the vast majority of the spectators were in favor of the attacking party, for the English had declined in popularity ever since the bitter dispute as to the disposal of the royal captive after the Battle of Poitiers. Hence the applause was by no means general when the herald-at-arms proclaimed, after a flourish of trumpets, the names and styles of the knights who were prepared, for the honour of their country and for the love of their ladies, to hold the field against all who might do them the favour to run a course with them. On the other hand, a deafening burst of cheering greeted the rival herald, who, advancing from the other end of the list, rolled forth the well-known titles of the 5 famous warriors who had accepted the defiance. "By St. James of Santiago," cried Don Pedro, with a tinge of colour upon his pale cheeks, "win who will, this has been a most notable contest." "Who comes next for England, John?" asked the prince in a voice which quivered with excitement. "Sir Nigel Loring of Hampshire, sire." "I pray that my vase may join them," said the prince. "But here is the Cavalier of Germany, and by my soul, he looks like a man of great valour and hardiness. Let them run their full 3 courses, for the issue is overgreat to hang upon one." A white mantle fluttered behind him, upon the left side of which was marked a broad black cross picked out with silver, which was a well-known badge of a Teutonic order. Mounted upon a horse as large, as black, and as forbidding as himself, he cantered slowly forward, with none of those prancings and gambades with which a cavalier was accustomed to show his command over his charger. Gravely and sternly he inclined his head to the prince, and took his place at the further end of the arena. He had scarce done so before Sir Nigel rode out from the holder's enclosure, and galloping at full speed down the lists, drew his charger up before the prince's stand with a jerk, which threw it back upon its haunches. With white armour, blazoned shield, and plume of ostrich feathers from his helmet, he carried himself in so jaunty and joyous a fashion, with tossing pennon and curvetting charger, that a shout of applause ran the full circle of the arena. With the air of a man who hastes to a joyous festival, he waved his lance in salute, and reining the pawing horse round without permitting its 4 feet to touch the ground, he hastened back to his station. A great hush fell over the huge multitude as the 2 last champions faced each other. A double issue seemed to rest upon their contest, for their personal fame was at stake as well as their party's honour. Both were famous warriors, but as their exploits had been performed in widely sundered countries, they had never before been able to cross lances. A course between such men would have been enough in itself to cause the keenest interest, apart from its being the crisis which would decide who should be the victors of the day. For a moment they waited, the Germans sombre and collected, Sir Nigel quivering in every fibre with eagerness and fiery resolution. Then, amid a long-drawn breath from the spectators, the glove fell from the marshal's hand, and the 2 steel-clad horsemen met like a thunderclap in front of the royal stand. The German, though he reeled for an instant before the thrust of the Englishman, struck his opponent so fairly upon the visor that the laces burst. The plumed helmet flew to pieces, and Sir Nigel galloped on down the lists with his bald head shimmering in the sunshine. 1,000 waving scarves and tossing caps announced that the first bout had fallen to the popular party. In the final bout, however, Sir Nigel struck his opponent with so true an aim that the point of the lance caught between the bars of his visor and tore the front of his helmet out, while the German, aiming somewhat low, and half stunned by the shock, had the misfortune to strike his adversary upon the thigh, a breach of the rules of the tilting yard, by which he not only sacrificed his chances of success, but would also have forfeited his horse and his armor, had the English knight chosen to claim them. A roar of applause from the English soldiers, with an ominous silence from a vast crowd who pressed round the barriers, announced that the balance of victory lay with the holders. Already the 10 champions had assembled in front of the prince to receive his award, when a harsh bugle call from the further end of the list drew all eyes to a new and unexpected arrival. Chapter 24. How a Champion Came Forth from the East. The Bordeaux lists were, as has already been explained, situated upon the plain near the river upon those great occasions when the tilting ground in front of the Abbey of St. Andrews was deemed to be too small to contain the crowd. On the eastern side of this plain the countryside sloped upwards, thick with vines in summer, but now ridged with the brown bare enclosures. Over the gently rising plain curved the white road which leads inland, usually flecked with travellers, but now with scarce a living form upon it, so completely had the list drained all the district of its inhabitants. Strange it was to see such a vast concourse of people, and then to look upon that broad, white, empty highway which wound away, bleak and deserted, until it narrowed itself to a bare streak against the distant uplands. Shortly after the contest had begun, anyone looking from the lists along this road might have remarked, far away in the extreme distance, 2 brilliant and sparkling points which glittered and twinkled in the bright shimmer of the winter sun. Within an hour these had become clearer and nearer, until they might be seen to come from the reflection from the headpieces of 2 horsemen who were riding at the top of their speed in the direction of Bordeaux. Another half hour had brought them so close that every point of their bearing and equipment could be discerned. The first was a knight in full armor, mounted upon a brown horse with a white blaze upon breast and forehead. He was a short man of great breadth of shoulder, with visor closed, and no blazonry upon his simple white surcoat or plain black shield. The other, who was evidently his squire and attendant, was unarmed save for the helmet upon his head, but bore in his right hand a very long and heavy oaken spear which belonged to his master. In his left hand the squire held not only the reins of his own horse, but those of a great black war-horse, fully harnessed, which trotted along at his side. Thus the 3 horses and their 2 riders rode swiftly to the lists, and it was a blare of the trumpet sounded by the squire as his lord rode into the arena which had broken in upon the prize-giving and drawn away the attention and interest of the spectators. "How, John!" cried the prince, craning his neck. "Who is this cavalier, and what is it that he desires?" "On my word, sire," replied Chandos, with the utmost surprise upon his face, "it is my opinion that he is a Frenchman." "A Frenchman?" repeated Don Pedro. "And how can you tell that, my Lord Chandos, when he has neither coat armor, crest, or blazonry?" "By his armor, sire, which is round at elbow and at shoulder than any of Bordeaux or of England. Italian he might be were his bassinet more sloped, but I will swear that those plates were welded betwixt this and Rhine. Here comes his squire, however, and we shall hear what strange fortune had brought him over the marches." As he spoke, the attendant cantered up the grassy enclosure, and pulling up his steed in front of the royal stand, blew a second fanfare upon his bugle. He was a raw-boned, swarthy-cheeked man, with black bristling beard and a swaggering bearing. Having sounded his call, he thrust a bugle into his belt, and, pushing his way betwixt the groups of English and of Gascon knights, he reined up within a spear's length of the royal party. "I come," he shouted in a hoarse, thick voice, with a strong Breton accent, "as squire and herald from my master, who is a very valiant pursuant of arms, and a liegeman to the great and powerful monarch, Charles, King of the French. My master has heard that there is jousting here, and prospect of honourable advancement, so he has come to ask that some English cavalier will vouchsafe, for the love of his lady, to run a course with sharpened lances with him, or to meet him with sword, mace, battle-axe, or dagger. He bade me say, however, that he would fight only with a true Englishman, and not with any mongrel who is neither English nor French, but speaks with the tongue of the one, and fights under the banner of the other. So, cried de Clisson, with a voice of thunder, while his countrymen clapped their hands to their swords. The squire, however, took no notice of their angry faces, but continued with his master's message. He is now ready, sire, he said, albeit his destree has travelled many miles this day, and fast, for we were in fear lest we come too late for the jousting. Ye have indeed come too late, said the prince, seeing that the prize is about to be awarded. Yet I doubt not that one of these gentlemen will run a course for the sake of honour with this cavalier of France. And as to the prize, sire, quoth Sir Nigel, I am sure that I speak for all when I say this French knight hath our leave to bear it away with him he can fairly win it. Bear word of this to your master, said the prince, and ask him which of these 5 Englishmen he would desire to meet. But stay, your master bears no coat armour, and we have not yet heard his name. My master, sire, is under vow to the Virgin neither to reveal his name nor to open his visor until he is back upon French ground once more. Yet what assurance have we, said the prince, that this is not some varlet masquerading in his master's harness, or some caitiff knight, the very touch of whose lance might bring infamy upon an honourable gentleman? It is not so, sire, cried the squire earnestly. There is no man upon earth who would demean himself by breaking a lance with my master. You speak out boldly, squire, the prince answered, but unless I have some further assurance of your master's noble birth and gentle name, I cannot match the choicest lances of my court against him. You refuse, sire? I do refuse. Then, sire, I was bidden to ask you from my master whether you would consent if Sir John Chandos, upon hearing my master's name, should assure you that he was indeed a man with whom you might yourself cross swords without indignity. I ask no better, said the prince. Then I must ask, Lord Chandos, that you will step forth. I have your pledge that the name shall remain ever a secret, and that you will neither say nor write one word which might betray it. The name is... He stooped down from his horse and whispered something into the old knight's ear which made him start with surprise, and stare with much curiosity at the distant knight, who was sitting his charger at the further end of the arena. Is this indeed sooth? He exclaimed. It is, my lord, and I swear it by St. Ives of Brittany. I might have known it, said Chandos, twisting his moustache, and still looking thoughtfully at the cavalier. What then, Sir John? Asked the prince. Sire, this is a knight whom it is indeed great honour to meet, and I would that your grace would grant me leave to send my squire for my harness, for I would dearly love to run a course with him. Nay, nay, Sir John, you have gained as much honour as one man can bear, and it were hard if you could not rest now. But I pray you, squire, to tell your master that he is very welcome to our court, and that wines and spices will be served him, if he would refresh himself before jousting. My master will not drink, said the squire. Let him then name the gentleman with whom he would break a spear. He would contend with these 5 knights, each to choose such weapons as suit him best. I perceive, said the prince, that your master is a man of great heart and high of enterprise. But the sun already is low in the west, and there will scarce be light for these courses. I pray you, gentlemen, to take your places, that we may see whether this stranger's deeds are as bold as his words. The unknown knight had sat like a statue of steel, looking neither to the right nor to the left during these preliminaries. He had changed from the horse upon which he had ridden, and bestrode the black charger which his squire had led beside him. His immense breadth, his stern composed appearance, and the mode in which he handled his shield and his lance, were enough in themselves to convince the thousands of critical spectators that he was a dangerous opponent. Aylward, who stood in the front row of the archers with Simon, Big John, and others of the company, had been criticizing proceedings from the commencement with the ease and freedom of a man who had spent his life under arms and had learned in a hard school to know at a glance the points of a horse and his rider. He stared now at the stranger with a wrinkled brow and the air of a man who is striving to stir his memory. What then would you do, John? Asked several. So they all strived to do. And what the better for that old beef and bones? Asked Black Simon. So I would turn what is but a lady's bodkin of a weapon into a very handsome club. And then, John, then I would take the other spear into my arm or my leg, or where it pleased him best to put it, and I would dash out his brains with my club. So it seems to me, said John seriously, or, again, one might seize the other round the middle, pluck him off his horse and bear him to the pavilion, there to hold him to ransom. What mean you? Why, John, so strong and strange a tilter must fight for the brightness of his lady's eyes or the curve of her eyelash, even as Sir Nigel does for the Lady Loring. I know not about that, said the big archer, scratching his head in perplexity. Since Mary hath played me false, I can scarce fight for her. Yet any woman will serve. Elwood's words were speedily justified, for even as he spoke, the two knights met in the centre of the lists. Beauchamp struck his opponent a shrewd blow upon the helmet, but was met with so frightful a thrust that he whirled out of his saddle and rolled over and over upon the ground. Sir Thomas Percy met with little better success, for his shield was split, his vambrace torn, and he himself wounded slightly in the side. Lord Audley and the unknown knight struck each other fairly upon the helmet, but while the stranger sat as firm and rigid as ever upon his charger, the Englishman was bent back to his horse's crupper by the weight of a blow, and had galloped halfway down the lists ere he could recover himself. Sir Thomas Wake was beaten to the ground with a battle-axe, that being the weapon which he had selected, and had to be carried to his pavilion. These rapid successes, gained one after the other over for celebrated warriors, worked the crowd up to a pitch of wonder and admiration. Thunders of applause from the English soldiers, as well as from the citizens and peasants, showed how far the love of brave and knightly deeds could rise above the rivalries of race. By my soul, John, cried the prince, with his cheek flushed and his eyes shining, this is a man of good courage and great hardiness. I could not have thought that there was any single arm upon earth which could have overthrown these four champions. He is indeed, as I have said, sire, a knight from whom much honour is to be gained. But the lower edge of the sun is wet, and it will be beneath the sea ere long. Here is Sir Nigel Loring, on foot and with his sword, said the prince. I have heard that he is a fine swordsman. Here and there bounded Sir Nigel, his head erect, his jaunty plume fluttering in the air, while his dark opponent sending crashing blow upon blow, following fiercely up with cut and with thrust, but never once getting past the practised blade of the skilled swordsman. The crowd roared with delight as Sir Nigel would stoop his head to avoid a blow, or by some slight movement of his body allow some terrible thrust to glance harmlessly past him. Suddenly, however, his time came. The Frenchman, whirling up his sword, showed for an instant a chink betwixt his shoulder piece and the rear brace which guarded his upper arm. In dashed Sir Nigel, and out again so swiftly that the eye could not follow the quick play of his blade, but a trickle of blood from the stranger's shoulder, and a rapidly widening red smudge upon his white surcoat, showed where the thrust had taken effect. The wound was, however, but a slight one, and the Frenchman was about to renew his onset, when, at a sign from a prince, Chandos threw down his baton, and the marshals of the list struck up the weapons and brought the contest to an end. It were time to check it, said the prince, smiling, for Sir Nigel is too good a man for me to lose, and, by the 5 holy wounds, if one of those cuts came home, I should have fears for our champion. What think you, Pedro? I think, Edward, that the little man was very well able to take care of himself. For my part, I should wish to see so well-matched a pair fight on while a drop of blood remained in their veins. We must have speech with him. Such a man must not go from my court without rest or sup. Bring him hither, Chandos, and, certes, if the Lord Loring hath resigned his claim upon this goblet, it is right and proper that this cavalier should carry it to France with him as a sign of the prowess that he has shown this day. As he spoke, the knight-errant, who had remounted his war-horse, galloped forward to the royal stand, with a silken kerchief bound round his wounded arm. The setting sun cast a ruddy glare upon his burnished arms, and sent his long black shadow streaming behind him up the level clearing. Pulling up his steed, he slightly inclined his head, and sat in the stern and composed fashion with which he had borne himself throughout, heedless of the applauding shouts and the flutter of kerchiefs from the long lines of brave men and of fair women who were looking down upon him. "My hurt is nothing, sire, nor are my horses weary," returned the stranger in a deep, stern voice. "Will you not at least hie back to Bordeaux with us, that you may drain a cup of muscadine and sup at our table?" "These are bitter words, Sir Knight," said Prince Edward, with an angry frown. "And they come from a bitter heart," answered the unknown knight. "How long is it since there has been peace in my hapless country? Where are the steadings and orchards and vineyards which made France fair? Where are the cities which made her great? From Provence to Burgundy we are beset by every prowling hireling in Christendom, who rend and tear the country which you have left too weak to guard her own marches. Is it not a byword that a man may ride all day in that unhappy land without seeing thatch upon roof or hearing the crow of cock? Does not one fair kingdom content you, that you should strive so for this other one which has no love for you? Pardieu, a true Frenchman's words may well be bitter, for bitter is his lot and bitter his thoughts as he rides through his thrice unhappy country." "Sir Knight," said the prince, "you speak like a brave man, and our cousin of France is happy in having a cavalier who is so fit to uphold his cause either with tongue or with sword. But if you think such evil of us, how comes it that you have trusted yourselves to us without warranty or safe conduct?" "Because I knew that you would be here, sire. Had the man who sits upon your right been ruler of this land, I had indeed thought twice before I looked to him for aught that was knightly or generous." With a soldierly salute, he wheeled round his horse, and, galloping down the lists, disappeared amid the dense crowd of footmen and of horsemen who were streaming away from the scene of the tournament. "The insolent villain!" cried Pedro, glaring furiously after him. "I have seen a man's tongue torn from his jaws for less. Would it not be well even now, Edward, to send horsemen to hail him back? Bethink you that it may be one of the royal house of France, or at least some knight whose loss would be a heavy blow to his master. Sir William Felton, you are well mounted. Gallop after the caitiff, I pray you." "Do so, Sir William," said the prince, "and give him this purse of 100 nobles as a sign of the respect which I bear for him. For, by St. George, he has served his master this day even as I would wish liegemen of mine to serve me." So saying, the prince turned his back upon the King of Spain, and springing upon his horse, rode slowly homewards to the Abbey of St. Andrews. Chapter 25. How Sir Nigel wrote to Twynham Castle. On the morning after the jousting, when Alleyne Edricson went, as was his custom, into his master's chamber to wait upon him in his dressing and to curl his hair, he found him already up and very busily at work. He sat at a table by the window, a deerhound on one side of him and a lurcher on the other, his feet tucked away under the trestle on which he sat, and his tongue in his cheek, with the air of a man who is much perplexed. A sheet of vellum lay upon the board in front of him, and he held a pen in his hand, with which he had been scribbling in a rude schoolboy hand. So many were the blots, however, and so numerous the scratches and erasures, that he had at last given it up in despair, and sat with his single uncovered eye cocked upwards at the ceiling, as one who waits upon inspiration. "By St. Paul," he cried, as Alleyne entered, "you are the man who will stand by me in this matter. I have been in sore need of you, Alleyne." "God be with you, my fair lord," the squire answered. "I trust that you have taken no hurt from all that you have gone through yesterday." "Nay, I feel the fresher for it, Alleyne. It has eased my joints, which were somewhat stiff from these years of peace. I trust, Alleyne, that thou didst very carefully note and mark the bearing and carriage of this knight of France. For it is time, now when you are young, that you should see all that is best and mold your own actions in accordance. This was a man from whom much honor might be gained, and I have seldom met any one for whom I have conceived so much love and esteem. Could I but learn his name, I should send you to him with my cartel, that we might have further occasion to watch his goodly feats of arms. It is said, my fair lord, that none know his name save only the Lord Chandos, and that he is under vow not to speak it. So ran the gossip at the squire's table. Be he who he might, he was a very hardy gentleman. But I have a task here, Alleyne, which is harder to me than aught that was set before me yesterday. Can I help you, my lord? In English, For my lady talks it more than she doth French. Yet this is no English word, my sweet lord. Here are 4 T's and never a letter betwixt them. Alleyne sat down as ordered, with a pen in his hand and a fresh sheet of parchment before him, while Sir Nigel slowly spelled out his letter, running his forefinger on from word to word. That my heart is with thee, my dear sweeting, is what thine own heart will assure thee of. All is well with us here, save that Pepin at the mange on his back, and Pomace has scarce yet got clear of his stiffness from being 4 days on shipboard, and the more so because the sea was very high, and we were like to founder on account of a hole in her side, which was made by a stone cast at us by certain sea rovers, who may the saints have in their keeping, for they have gone from amongst us, as has young Telek, and 20 mariners and archers, who would be the more welcome. Here as there is like to be a very fine war, with much honour and all hopes of advancement, for which I go to gather my company together, who are now at Montauban, where they pillage and destroy. Yet I hope that, by God's help, I may be able to show that I am their master, even as, my sweet lady, I am thy servant. That my heart is with thee, my dear sweeting, is what thine own heart will assure thee of. How that, Alleyne, continued Sir Nigel, blinking at his squire, with an expression of some pride upon his face. Have I not told her all that hath befallen us? You have said much, my fair lord, and yet, if I may say so, it is somewhat crowded together, so that my Lady Loin can, mayhap, scarce follow it, were it in shorter periods. Nay, it boots me not how you marshal them, as long as they are all there at the muster. Let my lady have the words, and she will place them in such order as pleases her best. But I would have you add what it would please her to know. That will I, said Alleyne, blithely, and bent to the task. That is very fairly set forth, said Sir Nigel, nodding his bald head as each sentence was read to him. And for thyself, Alleyne, if there be any dear friend to whom you would fain give greeting, I can send it for thee within this packet. There is none, said Alleyne, sadly. Have you no kinsfolk? Then, none, save my brother. None that I dare say so, and none whom you love. Nay, I will not say that, said Alleyne. Sir Nigel shook his head and laughed softly to himself. I see how it is with you, he said. Have I not noted your frequent sighs and vacant eye? Is he fair? She is indeed, cried Alleyne from his heart, all tingling at this sudden turn of the talk. And good, as an angel. And yet she loves you not. Nay, I cannot say that she loves another. Then you have hopes. I could not live else. Indeed, my lord, I do so strive, said Alleyne. But she is so sweet, so dainty, and of so noble a spirit, that I fear me that I shall never be worthy of her. By thinking so you become worthy. Is she then of noble birth? She is, my lord, faltered Alleyne, of a knightly house. Yes. My lord, I know little of the ways and usages of the world, cried Alleyne, but I would fain ask your read upon the matter. You have known my father and my kin. Is not my family one of good standing and repute? Beyond all question. And yet you warn me that I must not place my love too high. As he spoke, a heavy footfall was heard without, and the portly knight flung open the door and strode into the room. Why, my little coz, said he, I have come across to tell you that I live above the barbers in the Rue de la Tour, and that there is a venison pasty in the oven and 2 flasks of the right vintage on the table. By St. James, a blind man might find the place, for one is but to get in the wind from it, and follow the savory smell. Put on your cloak, then, and come, for Sir Walter Hewitt and Sir Robert Briquet, with 1 or 2 others, are awaiting us. Nay, Oliver, I cannot be with you, for I must to Montauban this day. If you will take charge of them, Oliver, for I will go to Montauban with none save my 2 squires and 2 archers. Then, when I have found the rest of my company, I shall lead them to Dax. We set forth this morning. Then I must back to my pasty, said Sir Oliver. You will find us at Dax, I doubt not, unless the prince throw me into prison. for he is very wroth against me. And why, Oliver? Pardieu, because I have sent my cartel, gauntlet, and defiance to Sir John Chandos and to Sir William Felton. Because he and the other have used me despitefully. And how? Has he jeered at you, then? Nay, nay, my dear Oliver, said Sir Nigel, laying his hand upon his angry friend's arm. There is naught in this, for it was but saying that you were a strong and robust man, who had need of a good destrier. And as to Chandos and Felton, bethink you that if when you yourself were young the older lances had ever been preferred, how would you then have had the chance to earn the good name and fame which you now bear? You do not ride as light as you did, Oliver, and I ride lighter by the weight of my hay. But it would be an ill thing if in the evening of our lives we show that our hearts were less true and loyal than of old. If such a knight as Sir Oliver Butterstone may turn against his own prince for the sake of a light word, then where are we to look for steadfast faith and constancy? For 1 hour, then, for we march at midday, tell Aylward, Alleyne, that he is to come with me to Montalban, and to choose one archer for his comrade. The rest will to Dax when the prince starts, which will be before the feast of the Epiphany. Have pommers ready at midday with my sycamore lance, and place my harness on the sumpter mule. With these brief directions, the two old soldiers strode off together, while Alleyne hastened to get all in order for their journey. It was a bright, crisp winter's day when the little party set off from Bordeaux on their journey to Montalban, where the missing half of their company had last been heard of. Sir Nigel and Ford had ridden on in advance, the knight upon his hackney, while his great war-horse trotted beside his squire. 2 hours later Alleyne Edricson followed, for he had the tavern reckoning to settle, and many other duties which fell to him as squire of the body. With him came Aylward and Hoddle John, armed as of old, but mounted for their journey upon a pair of clumsy lands horses, heavy-headed and shambling, but of great endurance, and capable of jogging along all day, even when between the knees of the huge archer, who turned the scale at 270 pounds. They took with them the sumpter mules, which carried in panniers the wardrobe and table furniture of Sir Nigel, for the knight, though neither fop nor epicure, was very dainty in small matters, and loved, however bear the board or hard the life, that his napery should still be white and his spoon of silver. There had been frost during the night, and the wide hard road rang loud under their horses' irons as they spurred through the east gate of the town, along the same broad highway which the unknown French champion had traversed on the day of the jousts. The three rode abreast, Alleyne Edricson with his eyes cast down and his mind distrait, for his thoughts were busy with a conversation which he had had with Sir Nigel in the morning. Had he done well to say so much, or had he not done better to have said more? What would the knight have said had he confessed to his love for the Lady Maud? Would he cast him off in disgrace, or might he chide him as having abused the shelter of his roof? If Alleyne Edricson had enough to ponder over as he rode through the bare plains of Guienne, his two companions were more busy with the present and less thoughtful of the future. Aylward rode for 1/2 mile with his chin upon his shoulder, looking back at a white kerchief which fluttered out of the gable window of a high house which peeped over the corner of the battlements. When at last a dip of the road hid it from his view, he cocked his steel cap, shrugged his broad shoulders, and rode on with laughter in his eyes, and his weather-beaten face all ashine with pleasant memories. John also rode in silence, but his eyes wandered slowly from one side of the road to the other, and he stayed and pondered and nodded his head like a traveler who makes his notes and saves them up for the retelling. By the rood, he broke out suddenly, slapping his thigh with his great red hand. I knew that there was something missing, but I could not bring to my mind what it was. What was it then? Asked Alleyne, coming with a start out of his reverie. Thou foolish old John, quoth Aylward, you should know better, since I have heard that the monks of Beaulieu could squeeze a good cup of wine from their own grapes. Know then that if these roads were dug up the wealth of the country would be gone, and mayhap there would be dry throats and gaping mouths in England, for in 3 months' time these black roots will blossom and shoot and burgeon, and from them will come many a good shipload of Medoc and Gascony, which will cross the narrow seas. But see the church in the hollow, and the folk who cluster in the churchyard. By my hill it is a burial, and there is a passing bell. He pulled off his steel cap as he spoke, and cross himself, with a muttered prayer for the repose of the dead. There, too, remarked Alleyne, as they rode on again, that which seems to the eye to be dead is still full of the sap of life, even as the vines were. Thus God hath written himself and his laws very broadly on all that is around us, if our poor dull eyes and duller souls could but read what he has set before us. Ha! Mon petit, cried the bowman, you take me back to the days when you were new-fledged, as sweet a little chick as ever pecked his way out of a monkish egg. I had feared that in gaining our debonair young man-at-arms we had lost our soft-spoken clerk. In truth, I have noted much change in you since we came from Twynham Castle. I am a slow-witted man, said John, and, in sooth, when I try to think about such matters it casts a gloom upon me. Yet I do not look upon myself as a worse man in an archer's jerkin than I was in a white cowl, if that be what you mean. It is milk, worthy sir, answered the peasant maid, who stood by the door of a cottage with a jug in her hand. Would it please you, gentles, that I should bring you out 3 horns of it? Nay, ma petite, but he is a 2 sous piece for thy kindly tongue and for the sight of thy pretty face. Ma foi, but she has a born mind. I have a mind to bide and speak with her. Nay, Aylward, cried Alleyne, Sir Nigel will await us, and he in haste. Tell me, friend, said Alleyne to the portly red-facing keeper, has a knight and a squire passed his way within the hour? Who, then? It was young Sieur de Crespigny of Saintonge, who chanced to be here, and made game of the Englishman, seeing that he was but a small man and of the face which is full of peace. But indeed this good knight was a very quiet and patient man, for he saw that the Sieur de Crespigny was still young and spoke from an empty head. So he sat his horse and quaffed his wine, even as you are doing now, all heedless of the clacking tongue. And what then, Michel? Ere the words were past the other's lips, he was beside him, his face nigh touching, and his breath hot upon his cheeks. I think, young sir, quoth he softly, looking into the other's eyes, that now that I am nearer you will very clearly see that the glove is not an archer's glove. Perchance not, said the Sieur de Crespigny with a twitching lip, nor is it large, but very small, quoth the Englishman. Less large than I had thought, said the other, looking down, for the knight's gaze was heavy upon his eyelids, and in every way such a glove as might be worn by the fairest and sweetest lady in England, quoth the Englishman. It may be so, said the Sieur de Crespigny, turning his face from him. I myself weak in the eyes, and have often taken one thing for another, quoth the knight, as he sprang back into his saddle and rode off, leaving the Sieur de Crespigny biting his nails before the door. Well, Messieurs, it chanced that the Sieur de Crespigny, having said this and that, for the laughter of the varlets, cried out at last about the glove that the knight wore in his soif, asking if it was the custom in England for a man to wear a great archer's glove in his cap. Pardieu, I have never seen a man get off his horse as quick as did that stranger Englishman. Ha! By the 5 wounds, many men of war have drunk my wine, but never one was more to my fancy than this little Englishman. By my hilt, he is our master, Michel, quoth Aylward, and such men as we do not serve under a laggett. But here are 4 deniers, Michel, and God be with you. En avant, comrades, for we have a long road before us. There is the smoke from Bazes, on the further side of Garonne, quoth he. There were 3 sisters yonder, the daughters of a farrier, and by these 10 finger bones, a man might ride for a long June day and never set eyes upon such maidens. There was Marie, tall and grave, and Blanche petite and gay, and the dark Agnes, with eyes that went through you like a waxed arrow. I lingered there as long as 4 days, and was betrothed to them all, for it seemed shame to set one above her sisters, and might make her blood in the family. Yet, for all my K, things were not merry in the house, and I thought it well to come away. There, too, is the mill of La Souris. Old Pierre Le Caron, who owned it, was a right good comrade, and had ever a seat and a crust for a weary archer. He was a man who wrought hard at all that he turned his hand to, but he heated himself in grinding bones to mix with his flour, and so through over-diligence he brought a fever upon himself and died. Tell me, Aylward, said Alleyne, what was amiss with the door of yonder, and that you should ask me to observe it? I saw a square hole, through which doubtless the host may peep when he is not too sure of those who knock. And saw you naught else? I marked that beneath this hole there was a deep cut in the door, as though a great nail had been driven in. And naught else? No. Had you looked more closely, you might have seen that there was a stain upon the wood. The first time that I ever heard my comrade Black Simon laugh was in front of that door. I heard him once again when he slew a French squire with his teeth, he being unarmed and the Frenchman having a dagger. And why did Simon laugh in front of the inn door? Asked John. Simon is a hard and perilous man when he hath the bitter drop in him, and, by my hilt, he was born for war, for there is little sweetness or rest in him. This inn, the Mouton d'Or, was kept in the old days by one Francois Gevrel, who had a hard fist and a harder heart. It was said that many and many an archer coming from the wars had been served with wine with simples in it, until he slept, and had then been stripped of all by this Gevrel. Then on the morrow, if he made complaint, this wicked Gevrel would throw him out upon the road or beat him, for he was a very lusty man, and had many stout varlets in his service. This chanced to come to Simon's ears when we were at Bordeaux together, and he would have it that we should ride to Cardillac with a good hempen cord, and give this Gevrel such a scourging as he merited. Forth we rode then, but when we came to the Mouton d'Or, Gevrel had had word of our coming and its purpose, so that the door was barred, nor was there any way into the house. Let us in, good Master Gevrel, cried Simon, and let us in, good Master Gevrel, cried I, but no word could we get through the hole in the door, save that he would draw an arrow upon us unless we went on our way. Well, Master Gevrel, quoth Simon at last, this is but a sorry welcome, seeing that we have ridden so far just to shake you by the hand. Canst shake me by the hand without coming in, said Gevrel. And how that? Asked Simon. By passing in your hand through the hole, said he. Nay, my hand is wounded, quoth Simon, and of such a size that I have heard that from that time English archers have been better treated in the auberge of Cardillac. But what have we here by the wayside? It appears to be a very holy man, said Alleyne, and, by the rood, he has some strange ways, cried John. What are these bits of stone, and of wood, and rusted nails, which are set out in front of him? The man whom they had remarked sat with his back against a cherry tree, and his legs shooting out in front of him, like one who is greatly at his ease. Across his thighs was a wooden board, and scattered over it all manner of slips of wood and knobs of brick and stone, each laid separate from the other, as a huckster places his ways. He was dressed in a long grey gown, and wore a broad hat of the same colour, much weather-stained, with 3 scallop shells dangling from the brim. As they approached, the travellers observed that he was advanced in years, and that his eyes were upturned and yellow. Dear knights and gentlemen, he cried in a high crackling voice, worthy Christian cavaliers, will ye ride past and leave an aged pilgrim to die of hunger? The sight has been burned from mine eyes by the sands of the Holy Land, and I have had neither crust of bread nor cup of wine these 2 days past. By my hilt, father, said Aylward, looking keenly at him, it is a marvel to me that thy girdle should have so goodly a span and clipped thee so closely, if you have in sooth had so little to place within it. Kind stranger, answered the pilgrim, you have unwittingly spoken words which are very grievous to me to listen to. Yet I should be loath to blame you, for I doubt not that what you said was not meant to sadden me, nor to bring my sore affliction back to my mind. It becomes me to prate too much of what I have endured for the faith, and yet, since you have observed it, I must tell you that this thickness and roundness of the waist is caused by a dropsy brought on by overhaste in journeying from a house of Pilate to the Mount of Olives. Aylward, said Alleyne, with a reddened cheek, let that curb your blunt tongue. How could you bring a fresh pang to this holy man, who hath endured so much and had journeyed as far as Christ's own blessed tomb? May the foul fiend strike me dumb, cried the bowman in hot repentance, but both the palmer and Alleyne threw up their hands to stop him. I forgive thee from my heart, dear brother, piped the blind man. But, oh, these wild words of thine are worse to mine ears than aught which you could say of me. Not another word shall I speak, said Aylward, but here is a franc for thee, and I crave thy blessing. And here's another, said Alleyne, and another, cried John, but the blind palmer would have none of their alms. Foolish, foolish pride, he cried, beating upon his chest with his large brown hand. Foolish, foolish pride. How long then will it be ere I can scourge it forth? Am I then never to conquer it? Oh, strong, strong are the ties of flesh, and hard it is to subdue the spirit. I come, friends, of a noble house, and I cannot bring myself to touch this money, even though it be to save me from the grave. Alas, father, said Alleyne, how then can we be of help to thee? I had set down here to die, quoth the palmer, but for many years I have carried in my wallet these precious things which you see set forth now before me. It was sin, thought I, that my secret should perish with me. I shall therefore sell these things to the first worthy passers-by, and from them I shall have money enough to take me to the shrine of Our Lady at Rocamadour, where I hope to lay these old bones. What are these treasures? Then, father, ask John. I can but see an old rusty nail, with bits of stone and slips of wood. And the wood and stone, holy father, asked Alleyne, with bated breath, as he stared awestruck at his precious relics. But, father, quoth Alleyne, the holy Alicia was bold, which brought down upon him the revilements of the wicked children. It is very true that he had not much hay, said the palmer quickly, and it is this which makes his relic so exceeding precious. Take now your choice of these, my worthy gentlemen, and pay such a price as your consciences will suffer you to offer, for I am not a chapman nor a huckster, and I would never part with them, did I not know that I am very near to my reward. Aylward, said Alleyne excitedly, this is such a chance as few folk have twice in one life. The nail I must have, and I will give it to the Abbey of Beaulieu, so that all the folk in England may go thither to wonder and to pray. Here are 3 more, said John. Down, pride, down, cried the pilgrim, still beating upon his chest. Can I not bend myself then to take the sorry sum which is offered me for that which has cost me the labours of a life? Give me the dross. Here are the precious relics, and, oh, I pray you that you will handle them softly and with reverence, else had I rather left my unworthy bones here by the wayside. With doffed caps and eager hands, the comrades took their new and precious possessions, and pressed onwards upon their journey, leaving the aged palmer still seated under the cherry tree. They rode in silence, each with his treasure in his hand, glancing at it from time to time, and scarce able to believe that chance had made them sole owners of relics of such holiness and worth that every abbey and church in Christendom would have bid eagerly for their possession. So they journeyed, full of this good fortune, until opposite the town of Lamars, where John's horse cast a shoe, and they were glad to find a wayside smith who might set the matter to rights. To him Aylward narrated the good hap which had befallen them, but the smith, when his eyes lit upon the relics, leaned up against his anvil and laughed, with his hand to his side, until the tears hopped down his sooty cheeks. Nay, nay, cried Alleyne. This was a holy man who had journeyed to Jerusalem and acquired a dropsy by running from the house of Pilate to the Mount of Olives. I know not about that, said the smith, but I know that a man with a grey palmer's hat and gown was here no very long time ago, and that he sat on yonder stump and ate a cold pullet and drank a flask of wine. Then he begged from me one of my nails, and filling his scrip with stones, he went upon his way. Look at these nails, and see if they are not the same as that which he has sold you. It was evening before the 3 comrades came into Aiguillon. There they found Sir Nigel Loring and Ford safely lodged at the sign of the Baton Rouge, where they supped on good fare and slept between lavender-scented sheets. It chanced, however, that a knight of Poitiers, Sir Gaston d'Estel, was staying there on his way back from Lithuania, where he had served a term with the Teutonic Knights under the Land Master of the Presbytery of Marienburg. He and Sir Nigel sat late in high converse as to bushments, outfalls, and the intaking of cities, with many tales of warlike men and valiant deeds. Then their talk turned to minstrelsy, and the stranger knight drew forth a citten, upon which he played the men leader of the north, singing the while in a high cracked voice of Hildebrand and Brunhild and Siegfried, and all the strength and beauty of the land of Alleyne. To this Sir Nigel answered with the romances of Sir Glimmer and of Sir Icembras, and so through the long winter night they sat by the crackling wood fire answering each other's songs until the crowing cocks joined in their concert. Yet, with scarce an hour of rest, Sir Nigel was as blithe and bright as ever as they set forth after breakfast upon their way. "This Sir Gaston is a very worthy man," said he to his squires as they rode from the Baton Rouge. "He hath a very strong desire to advance himself, and would have entered upon some small knightly debate with me, had he not chanced to have his arm bone broken by the kick of a horse. I have conceived a great love for him, and I have promised him that when his bone is mended I will exchange thrusts with him. But we must keep to this road upon the left." "Nay, my fair lord," quoth Aylward, "the road to Montauban is over the river, and so through Quercy and the Agenoual." "True, my good Aylward, but I have learned from this worthy knight, who hath come over the French marches, that there is a company of Englishmen who are burning and plundering in the country round Villefranche. I have little doubt, from what he says, that they are those whom we seek. We shall follow the lot until we come to Cahors, and then cross the marches into Villefranche," said Sir Nigel. "By St. Paul, as we are but a small band, it is very likely that we may have some very honourable and pleasing adventure, for I hear that there is little peace upon the French border." All morning they rode down a broad and winding road, barred with the shadows of poplars. Sir Nigel rode in front with his squires, while the two archers followed behind with the sumpter mule between them. They had left Aiguillon and the Garonne far to the south, and rode now by the tranquil Lot, which curves blue and placid through a gently rolling country. Alleyne could not but mark that, whereas in Guienne there had been many townlets and few castles, there were now many castles and few houses. On either hand, grey walls and square grim keeps peeped out at every few miles from amid the forest, while the few villages which they passed were all ringed round with rude walls, which spoke of the constant fear and sudden foray of a wild frontier land. Twice during the morning there came bands of horsemen swooping down upon them from the black gateways of wayside strongholds, with short, stern questions as to whence they came and what their errand. Bands of armed men clanked along the highway, and the few lines of laden mules which carried the merchandise of the trader were guarded by armed varlets, or by archers hired for the service. "Nay, my fair lord," said Alleyne, "these are not horses and a squire, but mules and a varlet. The man is a mercer, for he hath a great bundle beside him." It was easy to see, as he approached, from the quality of his dress and the richness of his trappings, that he was a man of some wealth and position. "Sir Knight," said he, "my name is David Micheldene, and I am a burgher and alderman of the good town of Norwich, where I live 5 doors from the church of Our Lady, as all men know on the banks of Yare. I have here my bales of cloth which I carried to Cahors. Woe worth the day that ever I started on such an errand. I crave your gracious protection upon the way for me, my servant, and my mercery, for I have already had many perilous passages, and have now learned that Roger Clubfoot, the robber knight of Quercy, is out upon the road in front of me. I hereby agree to give you 1 rose noble if you bring me safe to the inn of the Angel in Cahors, the same to be repaid to me or my aids if any harm come to me or my goods." "By St. Paul," answered Sir Nigel, "I should be a sorry knight if I asked pay for standing by a countryman in a strange land. You may ride with me and welcome, Master Micheldene, and your varlet may follow with my archers." "God's benison upon thy bounty," cried the stranger. "Should you come to Norwich, you may have cause to remember that you have been of service to Alderman Micheldene. It is not very far to Cahors, for surely I see the cathedral towers against the skyline, but I have heard much of this Roger Clubfoot, and the more I hear, the less do I wish to look upon his face. Oh, but I am sick and weary of it all, and I would give half that I am worth to see my good dame sitting in peace beside me, and to hear the bells of Norwich town." "Your words are strange to me," quoth Sir Nigel, "for you have the appearance of a stout man, and I see that you wear a sword by your side." "There is sooth in what you say, Master Micheldene," said Sir Nigel, "and I trust that we may come upon this Roger Clubfoot, For I have heard that he is a very stout and skilful soldier, and a man from whom much honor is to be gained." "He is a bloody robber," said the trader, curtly, "and I wish I saw him kicking at the end of a halter." "It is such men as he," Sir Nigel remarked, "who give the true knight honourable deeds to do, whereby he may advance himself." "It is such men as he," retorted Michael Dean, "who are like rats in a wheat rick or moths in a wolf ells, a harm and a hindrance to all peaceful and honest men. Yet, if the dangers of the road weigh so heavily upon you, Master Alderman, it is a great marvel to me that you should venture so far from home. And sometimes, Sir Knight, it is a marvel to myself, but I am a man who may grutch and grumble. But when I have set my face to do a thing, I will not turn my back upon it until it be done. There is one, Francois Villet, at Kehors, who will send me wine casks and my cloth bales. So to Kehors I will go, though all the rubber knights of Christendom would align the roads like yonder poplars." "Stoutly spoken, Master Alderman, but how have you fared hitherto?" "As a lamb fares in a land of wolves. 5 times we have had to beg and pray ere we could pass. Twice I have paid toll to the wardens of the road. 3 times we have had to draw, and once at La Rio we stood over our wool bales, Watkin and I, and we laid about us for as long as a man might chant a litany, slaying 1 rogue and wounding 2 others. By God's coif, we are men of peace, but we are free English burghers, not to be mishandled either in our country or abroad. Neither lord, baron, knight, or commoner shall have as much as a strike of flax of mine whilst I have strength to wag this sword." "And a passing strange sword it is," quoth Sir Nigel. "What make you, Alleyne, of these black lines which are drawn across the sheath?" "I cannot tell what they are, my fair lord." "Nor can I," said Ford. The merchant chuckled to himself. "It was a thought of mine own," said he, "for the sword was made by Thomas Wilson, the armour, who was betrothed to my second daughter Marjorie. Know then that the sheath is 1 cloth yard, in length, mark of according to feet and inches to serve me as a measuring wand. It is also of the exact weight of 2 pounds, so that I may use it in the balance." "By St. Paul," quoth Sir Nigel, "it is very clear to me that the sword is like thyself, good alderman, apt either for war or for peace. But I doubt not that even in England you have had much to suffer from the hands of robbers and outlaws. It was only last Lammerstide, Sir Knight, that I was left for dead near Reading as I journeyed to Winchester Fair. Yet I had the rogues up at the quarter pie powder, and they will harm no more peaceful traders." "You travel much then?" "To Winchester, Lynmart, Bristol Fay, Stourbridge, and Bartholomew's in London town. The rest of the year you may ever find me 5 doors from the Church of Our Lady, where I would from my heart that I was at this moment. For there is no air like Norwich air, and no water like the Yea, nor can all the wines of France compare with the beer of old Sam Yelverton, who keeps the Dun Cow. But, out and alack, here's an evil fruit which hangs upon this chestnut tree." As he spoke, they had ridden round a curve of the road, and come upon a great tree which shot 1 strong brown branch across their path. From the centre of this branch there hung a man, with his head at a horrid slant to his body, and his toes just touching the ground. He was naked save for a linen undershirt and pair of woolen drawers. Beside him on a green bank there sat a small man with a solemn face, and a great bundle of papers of all colours thrusting forth from the scrip which lay beside him. He was very richly dressed, with furred robes, a scarlet hood, and wide hanging sleeves lined with flame-coloured silk. A great gold chain hung round his neck, and rings glittered from every finger of his hands. On his lap he had a little pile of gold and of silver, which he was dropping, coin by coin, into a plump pouch which hung from his girdle. "May the saints be with you, good travellers," he shouted as the party rode up. "May the 4 evangelists watch over you. May the 12 apostles bear you up. May the blessed army of martyrs direct your feet and lead you to eternal bliss." The dead robber swung slowly to and fro in the wintry wind, a fixed smile upon his swarthy face, and his bulging eyes still glaring down the highway of which he had so long been the terror. On a sheet of parchment upon his breast was printed in rude characters, "He took a sorry time in dying," said the man who sat beside him. "He could stretch 1 toe to the ground and bear himself up, so that I thought he would never have done. Now at last, However, he is safely in paradise, and so I may jog on upon my earthly way." He mounted, as he spoke, a white mule which had been grazing by the wayside, all gay with fustian of gold and silver bells, and rode onward with Sir Nigel's party. "How know you then that he is in paradise?" asked Sir Nigel. "All things are possible to God, but, certes, without a miracle, I should scarce expect to find the soul of Roger Clubfoot amongst the just." "I know that he is there because I have just passed him in there," answered the stranger, rubbing his bejeweled hands together in placid satisfaction. "It is my holy mission to be a sumpter or pardoner. I am the unworthy servant and delegate of him who holds the keys. A contrite heart and 10 nobles the Holy Mother Church may stave off perdition, but he is the pardon of the first degree, with a 25-lever benison, so that I doubted he will so much as feel a twinge of purgatory. I came up even as the seneschal's archers were tying him up, and I gave him my full word that I would bide with him until he had passed. There were 2 leaden crowns among the silver, but I would not for that stand in the way of his salvation." "By St. Paul," said Sir Nigel, "if you have indeed this power to open and to shut the gates of hope, then indeed you stand high above mankind. But if you do but claim to have it, and yet have it not, then it seems to me, Master Clerk, that you may yourself find the gate barred when you shall ask admittance." Smaller faith, cried the Sumpno. "Aye, Sir Didymus yet walks upon earth, and yet no words of doubt can bring anger to mine heart, or a bitter word to my lip. For am I not a poor unworthy worker in the cause of gentleness and peace? Of all these pardons which I bear, every one is stamped and signed by our Holy Father, the prop and centre of Christendom." "Which of them?" asked Sir Nigel. How? Cried the pardoner, shaking a jewelled forefinger. "Thou wouldst be deep in the secrets of Mother Church? Know then that I have both in my scrip. Those who hold with Urban shall have Urban's pardon, while I have Clemens of the Clementist. Or he who is in doubt may have both, so that come what may he shall be secure. I pray you that you will buy one. For war is bloody work, and the end is sudden with little time for thought or shrift. Or you, so, for you seem to me to be a man who would do well to trust to your own merits." This to the alderman of Norwich, who had listened to him with a frowning brow and a sneering lip. "When I sell my cloth," quoth he who buys may weigh and feel and handle. "These goods which you sell are not to be seen, nor is there any proof that you hold them. Certes, if mortal man might control God's mercy, it would be one of a lofty and godlike life, and not one who is decked out with rings and chains and silks, like a pleasure wench at a kermesse." "Thou wicked and shameless man," cried the clerk, "dost thou dare to raise thy voice against the unworthy servant of Mother Church?" "Unworthy enough," quoth David Michael Dean. "I would have you to know, clerk, that I am a free English burgher, and that I dare say my mind to our father the Pope himself, let alone such a lackey's lackey as you." "Base-born and foul-mouthed knave," cried the Sumpno, "you prate of holy things, to which your hog's mind can never rise. Keep silence, lest I call a curse upon you." "Silence yourself," roared the other. "Foul bird, we found thee by the gallows like a carrion crow. A fine life thou hast of it with thy silks and thy baubles, cousining the last few shillings from the pouches of dying men. A fig for thy curse. Bide here, if you will take my rede, for we will make England too hot for such as you, when Master Wycliffe has the ordering of it. Thou vile thief, it is you, and such as you, who bring an evil name upon the many churchmen who lead a pure and a holy life. Thou outside the door of heaven, art more like to be inside the door of hell." At this crowning insult the Sumpno, with a face ashen with rage, raised up a quivering hand and began pouring Latin imprecations upon the angry alderman. The latter, however, was not a man to be quelled by words, for he caught up his ill-measured sword-sheath and bail aboard the cursing clerk with it. The latter, unable to escape from the shower of blows, set spurs to his mule and rode for his life, with his enemy thundering behind him. At sight of his master's sudden departure, the varlet Watkins set off after him, with the pack mule beside him, so that the four clattered away down the road together, until they swept round a curve and their babble was but a drone in the distance. Sir Nigel and Alleyne gazed in astonishment at one another, while Ford burst out laughing. "Pardieu," said the knight, This David Michael Dean must be one of those lollards about whom Father Christopher of the Priory had so much to say. Yet he seemed to be no bad man from what I have seen of him. I have heard that Wycliffe hath many followers in Norwich, answered Alleyne. By St. Paul, I have no great love for them. Quoth Sir Nigel, I am a man who am slow to change, and if you take away from me the faith that I have been taught, it would be long ere I could learn one to set in its place. It is but a chip here and a chip there, yet it may bring the tree down in time. Yet, on the other hand, I cannot but think it shame that man should turn God's mercy on and off, as a cellarman doth wine with a spigot. Nor is it, said Alleyne, part of the teachings of that mother church of which he had so much to say. There was sooth in what the alderman said of it. Then, by St. Paul, they may settle it betwixt them, quoth Sir Nigel. For me, I serve God, the king, and my lady, and so long as I can keep the path of honour I am well content. My creed shall ever be that of Chandos. Chapter 28. How the comrades came over the marches of France. After passing Cahors, the party branched away from the main road, and leaving the river to the north of them, followed a smaller track which wound over a vast and desolate plain. This path led them amid marshes and woods, until it brought them out into a glade with a broad stream swirling swiftly down the centre of it. Through this the horses splashed their way, and on the farther shore Sir Nigel announced to them that they were now within the borders of the land of France. For some miles they still followed the same lonely track, which led them through a dense wood, and then widening out, curved down to an open rolling country, such as they had traversed between Aiguillon and Cahors. If it were grim and desolate upon the English border, however, what can describe the hideous barrenness of this 10 times harried tract of France? The whole face of the country was scarred and disfigured, mottled over with the black blotches of burned farmsteadings, and the grey, gaunt gable ends of what had been chateaux. Broken fences, crumbling walls, vineyards littered with stones, the shattered arches of bridges. Look where you might, the signs of ruin and rapine met the eye. Here and there only, on the farthest skyline, the gnarled turrets of a castle, or the graceful pinnacles of church or monastery showed where the forces of the sword or the spirit had preserved some small islet of security in this universal flood of misery. Moodily and in silence the little party rode along the narrow and irregular track, their hearts weighed down by this fast-stretching land of despair. It was indeed a stricken and a blighted country, and a man might have ridden from Auvergne in the north to the marches of Foy, nor ever seen a smiling village or thriving homestead. From time to time as they advanced, they saw strange lean figures scraping and scratching amid the weeds and thistles, who, on sight of the band of horsemen, threw up their arms and dived in among the brushwood, as shy and as swift as wild animals. More than once, however, they came on families by the wayside, who were too weak from hunger and disease to fly, so they could but sit like hares on a tussock, with panting chests and terror in their eyes. So gaunt were these poor folk, so worn and spent, with bent and knotted frames, and sullen, hopeless, mutinous faces, that it made the young Englishman heartsick to look upon them. Indeed, it seemed as though all hope and light had gone so far from them that it was not to be brought back. For when Sir Nigel threw down a handful of silver among them, there came no softening of their lined faces, but they clutched greedily at the coins, peering questioningly at him, and champing with their animal jaws. Here and there amid the brushwood the travellers saw the rude bundle of sticks which served them as a home, more like a fowl's nest than the dwelling place of man. Yet why should they build and strive, when the first adventurer who passed would set torch to their thatch, and when their own feudal lord would wring from them with blows and curses the last fruits of their toil? They sat at the lowest depth of human misery, and hugged a bitter comfort to their souls as they realized that they could go no lower. Yet they had still the human gift of speech, and would take counsel among themselves in their brushwood hovels, glaring with bleared eyes and pointing with thin fingers at the great widespread chateaux which ate like a cancer into the life of the countryside. When such men, who are beyond hope and fear, begin in their dim minds to see the source of their woes, it may be an evil time for those who have wronged them. The weak man becomes strong when he has nothing, for then only can he feel the wild, mad thrill of despair. High and strong the chateaux, lowly and weak the brushwood hut. But God help the seigneur and his lady when the men of the brushwood set their hands to the work of revenge. Through such country did the party ride for 8, or it might be 9 miles, until the sun began to slope down in the west and their shadows to stream down the road in front of them. Wary and careful they must be, with watchful eyes to the right and the left, for this was no man's land, and their only passports were those which hung from their belts. Frenchmen and Englishmen, Gascon and Provencal, Brabanter, Tardvenu, Scorcher, Flair, and Free Companion, wandered and struggled over the whole of this accursed district. So bare and cheerless was the outlook, and so few and poor the dwellings, that Sir Nigel began to have fears as to whether he might find food and quarters for his little troop. It was a relief to him, therefore, when their narrow track opened out upon a larger road, and they saw some little way down at a square white house with a great bunch of holly hung out at the end of a stick from one of the upper windows. "By St. Paul," said he, "I am right glad, for I had feared that we might have neither provant nor herbergage. Ride on, Alleyne, and tell this innkeeper that an English knight with his party will lodge with him this night." Alleyne set spurs to his horse and reached the inn-door long bowshot before his companions. Neither varlet nor ostler could be seen, so he pushed open the door and called loudly for the landlord. 3 times he shouted, but, receiving no reply, he opened an inner door and advanced into the chief guest room of the hostel. A very cheerful wood fire was sputtering and cracking in an open grate at the further end of the apartment. At one side of this fire, in a high-backed oak chair, sat a lady, her face turned towards the door. The firelight played over her features, and Alleyne thought that he had never seen such queenly power, such dignity and strength upon a woman's face. She might have been 35 years of age, with aquiline nose, firm yet sensitive mouth, dark curving brows, and deep-set eyes which shone and sparkled with a shifting brilliancy. Beautiful as she was, it was not a beauty which impressed itself upon the beholder. It was her strength, her power, the sense of wisdom which hung over the broad white brow, the decision which lay in the square jaw and delicately molded chin. A chaplet of pearls sparkled amid her black hair, with a gauze of silver network flowing back from it over her shoulders. A black mantle was swathed round her, and she leaned back in her chair as one who is fresh from a journey. In the opposite corner there sat a very burly and broad-shouldered man, clad in a black jerkin trimmed with sable, with a black velvet cap, with curling white feather cocked upon the side of his head. A flask of red wine stood at his elbow, and he seemed to be very much at his ease, for his feet were stuck up on a stool, and between his thighs he held a dish full of nuts. These he cracked between his strong white teeth and chewed in a leisurely way, casting the shells into the blaze. As Alleyne gazed at him, he turned his face half round and cocked an eye at him over his shoulder. It seemed to the young Englishman that he had never seen so hideous a face, for the eyes were the lightest green, the nose was broken and driven inwards, while the whole countenance was seared and puckered with wounds. The voice, too, when he spoke, was as deep and as fierce as the growl of a beast of prey. "Young man," said he, "I know not who you may be, and I am not much inclined to bestir myself, but if it were not that I am bent upon taking my ease, I swear, by the sword of Joshua, that I would lay my dog-whip across your shoulders for daring to fill the air with these discordant bellowings." Taken aback at this ungentle speech, and scarce knowing how to answer it fitly in the presence of a lady, Alleyne stood with his hand upon the handle of the door, while Sir Nigel and his companions dismounted. At the sound of these fresh voices, and of the tongue in which they spoke, the stranger crashed his dish of nuts down upon the floor, and began himself to call for the landlord until the whole house re-echoed with his roarings. With an ashen face, the white-aproned host came running at his call, his hand shaking and his very hair bristling with apprehension. "For the sake of God, sirs," he whispered as he passed, "speak him fair and do not rouse him. For the love of the Virgin, be mild with him." "Who is this, then?" asked Sir Nigel. Alleyne was about to explain, when a fresh roar from the stranger interrupted him. "Thou villain innkeeper," he shouted, "did I not ask you when I brought my lady here whether your inn was clean?" "You did, sire." "Did I not very particularly ask you whether there were any vermin in it?" "You did, sire." "And you answered me?" "That there were not, sire. And yet ere I have been here an hour, I find Englishmen crawling about within it. Where are we to be free from this pestilent race?" Can a Frenchman upon French land not sit down in a French abode without having his ears pained by the clack of their hideous talk? Send them packing, in keeper, or it may be the worse of them and for you. I will, sire, I will, cried the frightened host, and bustled from the room, while the soft, soothing voice of the woman was heard remonstrating with a furious companion. Indeed, gentlemen, you had best go, said mine host. It is but 6 miles of Villefranche, where there are very good quarters at the sign of the Lion Rouge. Nay, answered Sir Nigel, I cannot go until I have seen more of this person, for he appears to be a man from whom much is to be hoped. What is his name and title? It is not for my lips to name it unless by his desire. But I beg and pray you, gentlemen, that you will go from my house, for I know not what may come of it if his rage should gain the mastery of him. By St. Paul, lisped Sir Nigel, this is certainly a man whom it is worth journeying far to know. Go tell him that a humble knight of England would make his further honourable acquaintance, not from any presumption, pride, or ill will, but for the advancement of chivalry and the glory of our ladies. Give him greeting from Sir Nigel Loring, and say that the glove which I bear in my cap belongs to the most peerless and lovely of his sex, whom I am now ready to uphold against any lady whose claim he might be desirous of advancing. The landlord was hesitating whether to carry this message or no, when the door of the inner room was flung open, and the stranger bounded out like a panther from its den, his hair bristling and his deformed face convulsed with anger. Still here, he snarled. Dogs of England, must he be lashed hence? Typhane, my sword. He turned to seize his weapon, but as he did so his gaze fell upon the blazonry of Sir Nigel's shield, and he stood staring, while the fire in his strange green eyes softened into a sly and humorous twinkle. Mort Dieu, cried he, it is my little swordsman of Bordeaux. I should remember that coat armour, seeing that it is but 3 days since I look upon it in the lists by Garonne. Ah, Sir Nigel, you owe me a return for this. And he touched his right arm, which was girt round just under the shoulder with a silken kerchief. But the surprise of the stranger at the sight of Sir Nigel was as nothing compared with the astonishment and the delight which shone upon the face of the Knight of Hampshire as he looked upon the strange face of the Frenchman. Twice he opened his mouth, and twice he peered again, as though to assure himself that his eyes had not played him a trick. Bertrand, he gasped at last. Bertrand du Guesclin. By St. Ives, shouted the French soldier, with a hoarse roar of laughter, it is well that I should ride with my visor down, for he that has once seen my face does not need to be told my name. It is indeed I, Sir Nigel, and here is my hand. I give you my word that there are but 3 Englishmen in this world whom I would touch, say, with the sharp edge of the sword. The prince is one, Chandos the second, and you the third, for I have heard much that is good of you. I am growing aged, and am somewhat spent in the wars, quoth Sir Nigel. But I can lay by my sword now with an easy mind, for I can say that I have crossed swords with him who had the bravest heart and the strongest arm of all this great kingdom of France. I have longed for it, I have dreamed of it, and now I can scarce bring my mind to understand that this great honour hath indeed been mine. By the Virgin of Rennes, you have given me cause to be very certain of it, said Du Guesclin, with a gleam of his broad white teeth. And perhaps, most honoured sir, it would please you to continue the debate. Perhaps you would condescend to go farther into the matter. God knows I am unworthy of such honour, yet I can show my 64 quarterings, and I have been present at some bickerings and scufflings during these 20 years. Your fame is very well known to me, and I shall ask my lady to enter your name upon my tablets, said Sir Bertrand. There are many who wish to advance themselves, and who bide their tone, for I refuse no man who comes on such an errand. At present it may not be, for mine arm is stiff from the small touch, and I would fain do you full honour when we cross swords again. Come in with me, and let your squires come also, that my sweet spouse, the Lady Typhane, may say that she has seen so famed and gentle a knight. Into the chamber they went in all peace and concord, where the Lady Typhane sat like queen on throne for each in turn to be presented to her. Sooth to say, the stout heart of Sir Nigel, which cared little for the wrath of a lion-like spouse, was somewhat shaken by the calm, cold face of this stately dame, for 20 years of camp life had left him more at ease in the lists than in a lady's boudoir. He bethought him, too, as he looked at her set lips and deep-set questioning eyes, that he had heard strange tales of the same Lady Typhane du Guesclin. Was it not she who was said to lay hands upon the sick and raise them from their couches when the leeches had spent their last nostrums? Had she not forecast the future? And were there not times when in the loneliness of a chamber she was heard to hold converse with some being upon whom mortal eye never rested, some dark familiar who passed where doors were barred and windows high? Sir Nigel sunk his eye and mark across on the side of his leg as he greeted this dangerous dame. And yet ere 5 minutes had passed he was hers, and not he only but his 2 young squires as well. The mind had gone out of them, and they could but look at this woman and listen to the words which fell from her lips, words which thrilled through their nerves and stirred their souls like the battle call of a bugle. Often in peaceful afterdays was Alleyne to think of that scene of the wayside inn of Auvergne. The shadows of evening had fallen, and the corners of the long, low, wood-panelled room were draped in darkness. The sputtering wood fire threw out a circle of red flickering light, which played over the little group of wayfarers, and showed up every line and shadow upon their faces. Sir Nigel sat with elbows upon knees, and chin upon hands, his patch still covering one eye, but his other shining like a star, while the ruddy light gleamed upon his smooth white head. Ford was seated at his left, his lips parted, his eyes staring, and a fleck of deep color on either cheek, his limbs all rigid as one who fears to move. On the other side, the famous French captain leaned back in his chair, a litter of nutshells upon his lap, his huge head half buried in a cushion, while his eyes wandered with an amused gleam from his dame to the staring, enraptured Englishman. Then, last of all, that pale, clear-cut face, that sweet, clear voice, with its high, thrilling talk of the deathlessness of glory, of the worthlessness of life, of the pain of ignoble joys, and of the joy which lies in all pains which lead to a noble end. Still, as the shadows deepened, she spoke of valor and virtue, of loyalty, honor, and fame, and still they sat drinking in her words while the fire burned down and the reddish turned to gray. "By the sainted Ives," cried du Guesclin at last, "it is time that we spoke of what we are to do this night, for I cannot think that in this wayside abide there are fit quarters for an honourable company." Sir Nigel gave a long sigh as he came back from the dreams of chivalry and hardihood into which this strange woman's words had wafted him. "I care not where I sleep," said he, "but these are indeed somewhat rude lodging for this fair lady." "What contents my lord contents me," quoth she. "I perceive, Sir Nigel, that you are under vow," she added, glancing at his covered eye. "It is my purpose to attempt some small deed," he answered. "And the glove, is it your lady's?" "It is indeed my sweet wife's." "Who is doubtless proud of you." "Say rather I of her," quoth he quickly. "God he knows that I am not worthy to be her humble servant. It is easy, lady, for a man to ride forth in the light of day, and do his devoir when all men have eyes for him. But in a woman's heart there is a strength and truth which asks no praise, and can but be known to him whose treasure it is." The Lady Typhane smiled across at her husband. "You have often told me, Bertrand, that there were very gentle knights amongst the English," quoth she. "Aye, aye," said he moodily. "But to horse, Sir Nigel, you and yours, and we shall seek the shadow of Sir Tristram de Rochefort, which is 2 miles on this side of Villefranche. He is seneschal of Auvergne, and mine old war companion." "Certes, he would have a welcome for you," quoth Sir Nigel, "but indeed he might look askance at one who comes without permit over the marches. By the Virgin, when he learns that you have come to draw away these rascals, he will be very blithe to look upon your face. Innkeeper, here are 10 gold pieces. What is over and above your reckoning you may take off from your charges to the next needy knight who comes this way. Come then, for it grows late and the horses are stamping in the roadway." The Lady Typhane and her spouse sprang upon their steeds without setting feet to stirrup, and away they jingled down the white moonlit highway, with Sir Nigel at the lady's bridle arm, and Ford a spear's length behind them. Alleyne had lingered for an instant in the passage, and as he did so there came a wild outcry from a chamber upon the left, and out there ran Aylward and John, laughing together like 2 schoolboys who were bent upon a prank. At sight of Alleyne, they slunk past him with somewhat of a shamefaced air, and springing upon their horses galloped after their party. The hubbub within the chamber did not cease, however, but rather increased, with yells of "A moi, Miss Amos! A moi, Comrades, à moi, l'honorable champion de l'évêque de Montauban, à la recuse de l'Église. So shrill was the outcry that both the innkeeper and Alleyne, with every varlet within hearing, rushed wildly to the scene of the uproar. It was indeed a singular scene which met their eyes. The room was a long and lofty one, stone-floored and bay, with a fire at the further end upon which a great pot was boiling. A deal table ran down the centre, with a wooden wine pitcher upon it and 2 horn cups. Some way from it was a smaller table with a single beaker and a broken wine bottle. From the heavy wooden rafters which formed the roof there hung rows of hooks which held up sides of bacon, joints of smoked beef, and strings of onions for winter use. In the very centre of all these, upon the largest hook of all, there hung a fat little red-faced man with enormous whiskers, kicking madly in the air and clawing at rafters, hams, and all else that was within hand-grasp. The huge steel hook had been passed through the collar of his leather jerkin, and they hung like a fish on a line, writhing, twisting, and screaming, but utterly unable to free himself from his extraordinary position. It was not until Alleyne and the landlord had mounted on the table that they were able to lift him down, when he sank gasping with rage into a seat, and rolled his eyes round in every direction. "Has he gone?" quoth he. "Gone? Who?" "He, the man with the red head, the giant man." "Yes," said Alleyne, "he hath gone, and comes not back." "No, the better for him," cried the little man, with a long sigh of relief. "Mon Dieu! What? Am I not the champion of the Bishop of Montauban? Aye! Could I have descended, could I have come down, ere he fled, then you would have seen. You would have beheld a spectacle then. There would have been one rascal the less upon earth. My voix, yes. Good Master Poligny, said the landlord, these gentlemen have not gone very fast, and I have a horse in the stable at your disposal, for I would rather have such bloody doings as you threaten outside the 4 walls of mine auberge. I hurt my leg and cannot ride, quoth the bishop's champion. I strained a sinew on the day that I slew the 3 men at Castelnau. God save you, Master Poligny, cried the landlord. It must be an awesome thing to have so much blood upon one's soul. And yet I do not wish to see so valiant a man mishandled, and so I will, for friendship's sake, ride after this Englishman and bring him back to you. You shall not stir, cried the champion, seizing the innkeeper in convulsive grasp. I have a love for you, Gaston, and I would not bring your house into ill repute, nor do such scath to these walls and chattels as must befall if 2 such men as this Englishman and I fall to work here. Nay, think not of me, cried the innkeeper. What are my walls when set against the honour of Francois Pursuivant d'Amour Poligny, champion of the Bishop of Montauban? My horse, Andre. By the saints, no, Gaston, I will not have it. You have said truly that it is an awesome thing to have such rough work upon one's soul. I am but a rude soldier, yet I have a mind. Mon Dieu, I reflect, I weigh, I balance. Shall I not meet this man again? Shall I not bear him in mind? Shall I not know him by his great paws and his red head? My voix, yes. And may I ask, sir, said Alleyne, why it is that you call yourself champion of the Bishop of Montauban? You may ask aught which it is becoming to me to answer. The bishop hath need of a champion, because, if any cause be set to test of combat, it would scarce become his office to go down into the lists with leather and shield and cudgel to exchange blows with any varlet. He looks around him then for some tried fighting man, some honest smiter who can give a blow or take one. It is not for me to say how far he has succeeded, but it is sooth that he who thinks that he have but to do with the Bishop of Montauban finds himself face to face with Francois Pursuivant d'Amour Poligny. At this moment there was a clatter of hoofs upon the road, and a varlet by the door cried out that one of the Englishmen was coming back. The champion looked wildly about for some corner of safety, and was clambering up towards a window, when Ford's voice sounded from without, calling upon Alleyne to hasten, or he might scarce find his way. Bidding adieu to landlord and to champion, therefore, he set off at a gallop, and soon overtook the 2 archers. A pretty thing this, John, said he. Thou wilt have holy church upon you, if you hang her champions upon iron hooks in an inn kitchen. It was done without thinking. he answered apologetically, while Aylward burst into a shout of laughter. "By my hilt, mon petit," said he, "you would have laughed also could you have seen it. For this man was so swollen with pride that he would neither drink with us, nor sit at the same table with us, nor as much as answer question, but must needs talk to the varlet all the time that it was well there was peace, and that he had slain more Englishmen than there were tags to his doublet. Our good old John could scarce lay his tongue to French enough to answer him, so he must needs reach out his great hand to him and place him very gently where you saw him. But we must on, for I can scarce hear their hoofs upon the road." "I think that I can see them yet," said Ford, peering down the moonlit road. "Pardieu, yes, now they ride full from the shadow. And yonder dark clump is the castle of Villefranche, en avant camarades. Or Sir Nigel may reach the gates before us. But hark, Miss Amos, what sound is that?" As he spoke, the hoarse blast of a horn was heard from some woods upon the right. An answering call rung forth upon their left, and hard upon it 2 others from behind them. "They are the horns of swineherds," quoth Aylward, "though why they blow them so late I cannot tell." "Let us on, then," said Ford, and the whole party, setting their spurs to their horses, soon found themselves at the castle of Villefranche, where the drawbridge had already been lowered and the portcullis raised in response to the summons of Du Guesclin. Chapter 29. How the blessed hour of sight came to the Lady Typhane. Sir Tristram de Rochefort, Seneschal of Auvergne and Lord of Villefranche, was a fierce and renowned soldier who had grown grey in the English wars. As lord of the marches and guardian of an exposed countryside, there was little rest for him even in times of so-called peace, and his whole life was spent in raids and outfalls upon the Brabanters, latecomers, flayers, free companions, and roving archers who wandered over his province. At times he would come back in triumph, and a dozen corpses swinging from the summit of his keep would warn evildoers that there was still a law in the land. At others his ventures were not so happy, and he and his troop would spur it over the drawbridge with clatter of hoofs hard at their heels and whistle of arrows about their ears. Hardy was of hand and harder of heart, hated by his foes, and yet not loved by those whom he protected, for twice he had been taken prisoner, and twice his ransom had been wrung by dint of blows and tortures out of the starving peasants and ruined farmers. Wolves or watchdogs, it was hard to say from which the sheep had most to fear. The castle of Villefranche was harsh and stern as its master. A broad moat, a high outer wall turreted at the corners, with a great black keep towering above all. So it lay before them in the moonlight, by the light of 2 flambeaux, protruded through the narrow slit-shaped openings at either side of the ponderous gate. They caught a glimpse of the glitter of fierce eyes and of the gleam of the weapons of the guard. The sight of the 2-headed eagle of Du Guesclin, however, was a passport into any fortalice in France, and ere they had passed the gate, the old border knight came running forwards with hands outthrown to greet his famous countryman. Nor was he less glad to see Sir Nigel, when the Englishman's errand was explained to him, for these archers had been a sore thorn in his side, and had routed 2 expeditions which he had sent against them. A happy day it would be for the Seneschal of Auvergne when they should learn that the last yew-bow was over the marches. The material for a feast was ever at hand in days when, if there was grim want in the cottage, there was at least rude plenty in the castle. Within an hour the guests were seated around a board which creaked under the great pasties and joints of meat, varied by those more dainty dishes in which the French excelled, the spiced ortolan and the truffled beccaficos. The Lady Rochefort, a bright and laughter-loving dame, sat upon the left of her warlike spouse, with Lady Typhane upon the right. Beneath sat Du Guesclin and Sir Nigel, with Sir Emery Monacourt, of the Order of the Hospitallers, and Sir Otto Harnet, a wandering knight from the kingdom of Bohemia. These, with Alleyne and Ford, 4 French squires, and the castle chaplain, made a company who sat together that night and made good cheer in the castle of Villefranche. The great fire crackled in the grate, the hooded hawks slept upon their perches, the rough deerhounds with expectant eyes crouched upon the tiled floor. Close to the elbows of a guest stood the dapper little lilac-coated pages. The laugh and jest circled round, and all was harmony and comfort. Little they recked of the brushwood men who crouched in their rags along the fringe of the forest, and looked with wild and haggard eyes at the rich, warm glow which shot a golden bow of light from the high-arched windows of the castle. Supper over, the tables dormant were cleared away as by magic, and trestles and bancals arranged around the blazing fire, for there was a bitter nip in the air. The Lady Typhane had sunk back in a cushioned chair, and her long dark lashes drooped low over her sparkling eyes. Alleyne, glancing at her, noted that her breath came quick and short, and that her cheeks had blanched to a lily white. Du Guesclin eyed her keenly from time to time, and passed his broad brown fingers through his crisp, curly black hair with the air of a man who is perplexed in his mind. "These folk here," said the Knight of Bohemia, "they do not seem too well fed." "Ow, canaille!" cried the Lord of Villefranche. "You would scarce credit it, and yet it is sooth that when I was taken at Poictiers it was all that my wife and foster brother could do to raise the money from them for my ransom. The sulky dogs would rather have 3 twists of a rack, or the thumbikins for an hour, than pay out a denier for their own feudal father and liege lord. Yet there is not one of them but an old stocking full of gold pieces hid away in a snug corner." "Why do they not buy food then?" asked Sir Nigel. "By St. Paul, it seemed to me their bones were breaking through their skin. It is their grutching and grumbling which makes them thin. We have a saying here, Sir Nigel, that if you pummel yet bonhomme he will pat you, but if you pat him he will pummel you. Doubtless you find it so in England." "Ma foi, no," said Sir Nigel. "I have 2 Englishmen of this class in my train, who are at this instant, I make little doubt, as full of your wine as any cask in your cellar. He who pummeled them might come by such a pat as he would be likely to remember." "I cannot understand it," quoth the seneschal, "for the English knights and nobles whom I have met were not men to brook the insolence of the base-born." "Perchance, my fair lord, the poor folk are sweeter and of a better countenance in England," laughed the Lady Rochefort. "Mon Dieu, you cannot conceive to yourself how ugly they are, without hair, without teeth, all twisted and bent. For me, I cannot think how the good God ever came to make such people. I cannot bear it, aye, and so my trusty Raoul goes ever before me with a cudgel to drive them from my path." "Yet they have souls. Fair lady, they have souls," murmured the chaplain, a white-haired man with a weary, patient face. "So I have heard you tell them," said the lord of the castle. "And for myself, father, though I am a true son of Holy Church, yet I think that you were better employed in saying your mess and in teaching the children of my men-at-arms than in going over the countryside to put ideas in these folks' heads which would never have been there but for you. I have heard that you have said to them that their souls are as good as ours, and that it is likely that in another life they may stand as high as the oldest blood of Auvergne. For my part, I believe that there are so many worthy knights and gallant gentlemen in heaven who know how such things should be arranged, that there is little fear that we shall find ourselves mixed up with base roturiers and swineherds. Tell your beads, father, and con your psalter, but do not come between me and those whom the king has given to me." "God help them," cried the old priest. "A higher king than yours has given them to me, and I tell you here in your own castle hall, Sir Tristram de Rochefort, that you have sinned deeply in your dealings with these poor folk, and that the hour will come, and may even now be at hand, when God's hand will be heavy upon you for what you have done." He rose as he spoke, and walked slowly from the room. "Pest take him," cried the French knight. "Now, what is a man to do with a priest, Sir Bertrand? For one can neither fight him like a man nor coax him like a woman." "Ow! Sir Bertrand knows, the naughty one," cried the Lady Rochefort. "Have we not all heard how he went to Avignon and squeezed 50,000 crowns out of the Pope?" "Ma foi," said Sir Nigel, looking with a mixture of horror and admiration at Du Guesclin. "Did not your heart sink within you? Were you not smitten with fears? Have you not felt a curse hang over you?" "I have not observed it," said the Frenchman carelessly. "But by St. Ives, Tristram, this chaplain of yours seems to me to be a worthy man, and you should give heed to his words. For though I care nothing for the curse of a bad pope, it would be a grief to me to have aught but a blessing from a good priest." "Hark to that, my fair lord," cried the Lady Rochefort. "Take heed, I pray thee, for I do not wish to have a blight cast over me, nor a palsy of the limbs. I remember that once before you angered Father Stephen, and my tirewoman said that I lost more hair in 7 days than ever before in a month. If that be sign of sin, then, by St. Paul, I have much upon my soul," said Sir Nigel, amid a general laugh. "But in very truth, Sir Tristram, if I may venture a word of counsel, I should advise that you make your peace with this good man. He shall have 4 silver candlesticks, said the seneschal moodily, and yet I would that he would leave the folk alone. You cannot conceive in your mind how stubborn and brainless they are. Mules and pigs are full of reason beside them. God he knows that I have had great patience with them. It was but last week that, having to raise some money, I called up to the castle Jean Goubet, who, as all men know, has a casket full of gold pieces hidden away in some hollow tree. I give you my word that I did not so much as lay a stripe upon his fool's back, but after speaking with him, and telling him how needful the money was to me, I left him for the night to think over the matter in my dungeon. What think you that the dog did? Why, in the morning we found that he had made a rope from strips of his leathern jerkin, and had hung himself to the bar of the window. For me, I cannot conceive such wickedness, cried the lady. And there was Gertrude Leboeuf, as fair a maiden as I could see, but as bad and bitter as the rest of them. When young Amory de Valence was here last Lamistide, he looked kindly upon the girl, and even spoke of taking her into his service. What does she do with a dog of a father? Why, they tie themselves together and leap into the linden pool, where the water is 5 spears' lengths deep. I give you my word that it was a great grief to young Amory, and it was days ere he could cast it from his mind. But how can one serve people who are so foolish and so ungrateful? Whilst the seneschal of Villefranche had been detailing the evil doings of his tenants, Alleyne had been unable to take his eyes from the face of Lady Typhane. She had lain back in her chair, with drooping eyelids and bloodless face, so that he had feared at first a journey had weighed heavily upon her, and that the strength was ebbing out of her. Of a sudden, however, there came a change, for a dash of bright color flickered up on either cheek, and her lids were slowly raised again upon eyes which sparkled with such lustre as Alleyne had never seen in human eyes before, while their gaze was fixed intently, not on the company, but on the dark tapestry which draped the wall. So transformed and so ethereal was her expression, that Alleyne, in his loftiest dream of archangel or of seraph, had never pictured so sweet, so womanly, and yet so wise a face. Glancing at Du Guesclin, Alleyne saw that he also was watching his wife closely, and from the twitching of his features and the beads upon his brick-colored brow, it was easy to see that he was deeply agitated by the change which he marked in her. "How is it with you, lady?" he asked at last, in a tremulous voice. Her eyes remained fixed intently upon the wall, and there was a long pause ere she answered him. Her voice, too, which had been so clear and ringing, was now low and muffled as that of one who speaks from a distance. "All is very well with me, Bertrand," said she. "The blessed hour of sight has come round to me again." "I could see it come. I could see it come," he exclaimed, passing his fingers through his hair with the same perplexed expression as before. "This is untoward, Sir Tristram," he said at last, "and I scarce know in what words to make it clear to you, and to your fair wife, and to Sir Nigel Loring, and to these other stranger knights. My tongue is a blunt one, and fitter to shout word of command than to clear up such a matter as this, of which I can myself understand little. This, however, I know, that my wife has come of a very sainted race, whom God hath in his wisdom endowed with wondrous powers, so that Typhane Racanel was known throughout Brittany ere ever I first saw her at Dinan. Yet these powers are ever used for good, and they are the gift of God and not of the devil, which is the difference betwixt white magic and black. Perchance it would be as well that we should send for Father Stephen, said Sir Tristram. It would be best that he should come, cried the Hospitaller. And bring with him a flask of holy water, added the Knight of Bohemia. Not so, gentlemen, answered Sir Bertrand. It is not needful that this priest should be called, and it is in my mind that in asking for this he cast some slight shadow or slur upon the good name of my wife, as though it was still doubtful whether her power came to her from above or below. If ye have indeed such a doubt, I pray that you will say so, that we may discuss the matter in a fitting way. For myself, said Sir Nigel, I have heard such words fall from the lips of this lady that I am of the opinion that there is no woman, save only one, who can be in any way compared to her in beauty and in goodness. Should any gentleman think otherwise, I should deem it great honor to run a small course with him, or debate the matter in whatever way might be most pleasing to him. Nay, it would become me to cast a slur upon a lady who is both my guest and the wife of my comrade in arms, said the Seneschal of Villefranche. I have perceived also that on a mantle there is marked a silver cross, which is surely sign enough that there is naught of evil in these strange powers which you say that she possesses. This argument of the seneschal's appealed so powerfully to the Bohemian and to the Hospitaller that they at once intimated that their objections had been entirely overcome, while even the Lady Rochefort, who had sat shivering and crossing herself, ceased to cast glances at the door, and allowed her fears to turn to curiosity. Among the gifts which have been vouchsafed to my wife, said Du Guesclin, there is the wondrous one of seeing into the future, but it comes very seldom upon her, and goes as quickly, for none can command it. The blessed hour of sight, as she hath named it, has come but twice since I have known her, and I can vouch for it that all that she hath told me was true, for on the evening of the battle of Orry she said that the morrow would be an ill day for me and for Charles of Blois. Ere the sun had sunk again he was dead, and I the prisoner of Sir John Chandos. Yet it is not every question that she can answer, but only those. Bertrand, Bertrand, cried the lady in the same muttering faraway voice, the blessed hour passes. Use it, Bertrand, while you may. I will, my sweet. Tell me, then, what fortune comes upon me? Danger, Bertrand, deadly, pressing danger, which creeps upon you and you know it not. The French soldier burst into a thunderous laugh, and his green eyes twinkled with amusement. At what time during these 20 years would not that have been a true word? He cried. Danger is in the air that I breathe. But is this so very close? Typhane. Here, now, close upon you. The words came out in broken, strenuous speech, while the lady's fair face was writhed and drawn like that of one who looks upon a horror which strikes the words from her lips. Du Guesclin gazed round the tapestried room, at the screens, the tables, the abbase, the credence, the buffet with its silver salver, and the half-circle of friendly, wondering faces. There was an utter stillness, save for the sharp breathing of the Lady Typhane and for the gentle soughing of the wind outside, which wafted to their ears the distant call upon a swineherd's horn. The danger may bide, said he, shrugging his broad shoulders. And now, Typhane, tell us what will come of this war in Spain. I can see little, she answered, straining her eyes and puckering her brow, as one who would fain clear her sight. There are mountains and dry plains, and flash of arms and shouting of battle cries. Yet it is whispered to me that by failure you will succeed. Ha! Sir Nigel, how like you that? Quoth Bertrand, shaking his head. It is like mead and vinegar, half sweet, half sour. And is there no question which you would ask my lady? Certes there is. I would fain know, fair lady, how all things are at Twynham Castle, and above all how my sweet lady employs herself. To answer this I would fain lay hand upon one whose thoughts turn strongly to this castle which you have named. Nay, my Lord Loring, it is whispered to me that there is another here who hath thought more deeply of it than you. Thought more of mine own home, cried Sir Nigel. Lady, I fear that in this matter at least you are mistaken. Not so, Sir Nigel. Come hither, young man, young English squire with the grey eyes. Now give me your hand, and place it here across my brow, that I may see that which you have seen. What is this that rises before me? Mist, mist, rolling mist with a square black tower above it. See, it shreds out, it thins, it rises, and there lies a castle in green plain, with the sea beneath it, and a great church within a bowshot. There are 2 rivers which run through the meadows, and between them lie the tents of the besiegers. The besiegers, cried Alleyne, Ford, and Sir Nigel, all 3 in a breath. Yes, truly, and they press hard upon the castle, for they are an exceeding multitude and full of courage. See how they storm and rage against the gate, while some rear ladders, and others, line after line, sweep the walls with their arrows. There are many leaders who shout and beckon, and one, a tall man with a golden beard, who stands before the gate stamping his foot and hallooing them on, as a pricker doth the hounds. But those in the castle fight bravely. There is a woman, 2 women, who stand upon the walls and give heart to the men-at-arms. They shower down arrows, darts, and great stones. Ah! They have struck down the tall leader, and the others give back. The mist thickens, and I can see no more. By St. Paul, said Sir Nigel, I do not think that there can be any such doings at Christchurch, and I am very easy the fortalice so long as my sweet wife hangs the key of the outer bailey at the head of her bed. Yet I will not deny that you have pictured the castle as well as I could have done myself, and I am full of wonderment at all that I have heard and seen. I would, Lady Typhane, cried the Lady Rochefort, that you would use your power to tell me what had befallen my golden bracelet, which I wore when hawking upon the second Sunday of Advent, and have never set eyes upon since. Nay, lady, said Du Guesclin, it does not befit so great and wondrous a power to pry and search and play the varlet even to the beautiful chatelaine of Villefranche. Ask a worthy question, and, with the blessing of God, you shall have a worthy answer. Then I would fain ask, cried one of the French squires, as to which may hope to conquer in these wars betwixt the English and ourselves. Both will conquer and each will hold its own, answered the Lady Typhane. Then we shall still hold Gascony and Guienne, cried Sir Nigel. The lady shook her head. French land, French blood, French speech, she answered. They are French, and France shall have them. But not Bordeaux, cried Sir Nigel excitedly. Bordeaux also is for France. But Calais too. Woe worth me then, and ill hail to these evil words. If Bordeaux and Calais be gone, then what is left for England? It seems indeed that there are evil times coming upon your country, said Du Guesclin. In our fondest hopes we never thought to hold Bordeaux. By St. Ives, this news hath warmed the heart within me. Our dear country will then be very great in the future. Typhane, great and rich and beautiful, she cried. Far down the course of time I can see her still leading the nations, a wayward queen among the peoples, great in war, but greater in peace, quick in thought, deft in action, with her peoples will for a sole monarch, from the sands of Calais to the blue seas of the south. How? Cried Du Guesclin, with his eyes flashing in triumph. You hear her, Sir Nigel, and she never yet said word which was not sooth. The English knight shook his head moodily. What of my own poor country? Said he. I fear, lady, that what you have said bodes but small good for her. The lady sat with parted lips, and her breath came quick and fast. My God, she cried, what is this it has shown me? Whence come they, these peoples, these lordly nations, these mighty countries which rise up before me? I look beyond, and others rise, and yet others, far and farther to the shores of the uttermost waters. They crowd, they swarm, the world is given to them, and it resounds with the clang of their hammers and the ringing of their church bells. They call them many names, and they rule them this way or that, but they are all English, for I can hear the voices of the people. On I go, and onwards over seas where men have never yet sailed, and I see a great land under new stars and a stranger sky, and still the land is England. Where have her children not gone? What have they not done? Her banner is planted on ice. Her banner is scorched in the sun. She lies athwart the lands, and her shadow is over the seas. Bertrand, Bertrand, we are undone for the buds of a bud even as our choicest flower. Her voice rose into a wild cry, and throwing up her arms, she sank back white and nerveless into the deep oaken chair. It is over, said Du Guesclin moodily, as he raised a drooping head with his strong brown hand. Wine for the lady, squire. The blessed hour of sight hath passed.